Okay, so I was planning. I'm doing some segments in my intensive course called Introduction to Philosophy about Aristotle, and I'm going to be doing a segment about his metaphysics and his ethics. But I was going to do a segment about his logic, but I think that might be a little too advanced for a intro to philosophy class. Because when I was in an intro class, I never learned about Aristotle's logic. I learned about his metaphysics and his ethics, but not his logic. So in this video, we're going to discuss Aristotelian logic and the idea of what the syllogism is and how that is a big thing in today's logic. And basically, with Aristotle, there was no basically after Aristotle, in his prior analytics, posterior analytics, and his main dialogues. Basically, every thinker who decided to bring something new to the table in logic, was deemed as crazy. Why are you trying to, think of anything different? Why are you trying to change logic? Because Aristotle did it already. You're just nuts. Until Frege, and then Frege basically brought predicate logic to the table and changed everything. So we're going to be going into this a little bit. So when you learn logic, if you take a logic class, what you're first going to learn about is basically what a argument is and what deduction and induction are. And I have a lot of videos about this kind of stuff, but I want to talk about it as it pertains to Aristotle. First of all, deduction, according to Aristotle, is it's speech in which certain things, having been supposed something different from those supposed results of necessity because of their being so. So basically, with deduction, you have a premise, and the premise is a thing that is supposed, and a conclusion is a result of necessity. And basically, in Aristotle, if you have premises and you have a conclusion, if you learn logic, your premises cannot be true while your conclusion is false. Now, when I learned logic, I learned logic in college from a pretty crazy guy, and when I learned that, he would always say and make us chant this: if your premises are true, your conclusion must be false. Or he had a way of saying it. It was if the premises are true, the conclusion can't be false. No, it was if the premises must be true, then the conclusion must be true, and that is kind of in Aristotle's writing. That's sort of a basically what we call today as validity in a argument, because a argument is valid if when we have true premises, the conclusion is also true. However, if we have true premises and a false conclusion, then our argument is not valid. So basically, with deduction, you go from more general premises to a more specific conclusion. Where in induction, which Aristotle discussed in the posterior analytics, you go from more particular premises to a more general conclusion, which is more useful for science. So what is Aristotle famous for? He's famous for the square of opposition, and basically what the syllogism is. So when we have a P is a P and S are different things. So the universal is P is affirmed of S, or all S are P, and a denial of that is P is denied of all S, and a particular version of that is P is affirmed of some S, or some S is P. Denial is P is is denied of some s, and indefinite is p. P is affirmative of s, or s is p, and p is denied of s in the denial. So the square of opposition is, on one hand, we have every a is b, and the and then the universal denial is no a is b, and diagonal from that is some a is b. And those are converses, I think. And then every a is b, we have not every a is b. So the syllogism is based on that thing. And the syllogism is where we have a major premise and a minor premise, or a middle term. Basically, you have to, in the major and minor premises, you have to have a term which is similar in the first two, and also have a term in the major premise and the conclusion, which are similar. So you have to have a term which is similar in the minor premise with the you have to have a term which is similar with the major and minor premise, and a term which is similar with the major premise and the conclusion. Both terms not similar, given the argument, which is very, very used in logic. All humans are mortal, premise. All Greeks are mortal. See how the terms thing, and the conclusion would be all Greeks are mortal. See how the terms kind of like match up, and that is what a syllogism is, where we have a middle term, which kind of, I guess, I don't know how to explain this, where we have the predicate of the conclusion is in the major premise, and the predicate of and the predicate of the middle term in the major premise also. So you can see how things line up with the major, minor, and the major and the conclusion. So that is the major idea of it. Now, I think if you read Aristotle on this, it'd be a little more complicated, a little more, I guess, difficult to get into. And I'd like to own those books at some point in the future, but I don't know when, if I would ever. But that's kind of the basic idea of it. And then when Frege came along, something different happened when Frege came along. Frege introduced the idea of a predicate and an individual being put together, I guess, and also the idea of a quantifier. Pretty much, if you're doing sentential logic, which is basically when you learn logic and you do sentential logic, which is like translating from English to like letters. If you're trying to say that there are two A's such that blah blah blah, you have to write long things. There is two A's and not a B, such that blah blah blah. You have to write this big long thing, or among A and B and C, some are this and some are not. You have to write this big long thing out. Where with Frege's quantifiers, we have the existential quantifier and the universal quantifier, where you basically have to put those things in front of, which is saying the universal quantifier being always or all, and the existential being some or there is a. It makes things a lot easier. It makes things a lot more simpler. And we're in sentential logic, which basically comes from Aristotle. You would basically write, let's say, Mary goes to the dance. You would just basically write M for that one letter. Let's say Mary is diabetic. So you basically write X being the. Well, basically you would write M in basic sentential logic. Where in predicate logic you would have X being Mary, and then capital D, and then X, because Mary would be the individual, and the D would be the predicate, and having in having diabetes. So it makes things easier, and sometimes things will get a little more complicated, but it'd be way more complicated in doing, certain things in sentential logic, that you'd be doing in practical logic. So that's my little thought on that. So let me know if you think I messed anything up or butchered anything, and comment below, and thank you.